The last survivors have been carried to shore. The last diver has surfaced. The searchlights finally go dark. For the rescuers of Giglio Island, the nightmare is over. For everyone else, it's just beginning. Because somewhere inside that broken hull, beneath twisted steel and flooded corridors, a ship is still talking. Every course correction, every alarm, every voice on the bridge in the seconds before impact. It's all still there, waiting to be heard. And what it reveals will not be a story about the sea turning against a ship. It will be a story about the men who were supposed to protect it. But before we get to the investigation, let's go back to the night itself. Because to understand what the black box revealed, you first have to understand what it recorded. It was the 13th of January 2012. Costa Concordia had left the port of Civitavecchia a few hours earlier, carrying more than 4,000 people on the first night of a week-long Mediterranean cruise. The sea was calm, the sky was clear. There was nothing on paper that should have gone wrong. But Captain Francesco Schettino had other plans for that evening. As the ship approached the island of Giglio, he ordered a change of course, a close pass near the shoreline, known in the industry as the sail by salute, a tradition of sorts. A way to greet the island, show off the ship, put on a display for the passengers watching from the deck. It was not the approved route, and it was closer to shore than the ship had ever sailed before. Schettino later admitted that he switched off the alarm on the ship's navigation system before making the approach. He said he knew these waters. He said he'd made this same pass 3 or 4 times before. This time, he was navigating by sight, in the dark, off his charted course, without a system that was built to warn him if he strayed too close to danger. At 9:45, the ship's officers spotted white waters, waves breaking over something just beneath the surface, the reef known as l'Escole. It was already charted, it was already known, it had already claimed ships before Costa Concordia, some of them centuries earlier. Schettino gave the order to turn. It came too late. The ship's port side struck the rock. The impact tore a gash more than 50 meters long along the hull, deep enough and long enough to breach 5 separate watertight compartments at once. Modern cruise ships are built to survive flooding in 2. Costa Concordia was flooding in 5. Within minutes, the engine rooms filled with seawater. The lights failed, the engines died. The ship that moments earlier had been under full power and full control was now dead in the water, drifting, listing, completely at the mercy of the wind and current, back toward the island she had just tried to salute. And this is where the failures compounded. Inside the ship, passengers felt the impact, heard the shudder, watched the lights flicker and die. Many assumed the worst. They were told otherwise. Crew members announced there had been an electrical problem, a blackout, nothing more. Passengers were told to return to their cabins. Some were reassured that everything was under control, while below deck seawater was pouring through torn steel. When the Italian Coast Guard first contacted the ship at around 10:12 p.m., nearly half an hour after the collision, Schettino gave them the same story. A blackout, nothing serious. It was only when the Coast Guard called back roughly 10 minutes later that someone aboard finally admitted the truth. The ship was taking on water. Schettino requested tugboats. The general alarm, the signal that tells everyone aboard to stop what they are doing and move to their lifeboat stations, was not sounded until well over half an hour after the collision. The order to abandon ship didn't come until nearly an hour and 15 minutes after impact. In a disaster where every minute mattered, Costa Concordia's own captain spent the first of them lying about what was happening. By the time the alarm finally sounded, the ship was listing so heavily that many of the lifeboats were already useless. On the high side of the tilt, boats hung uselessly in the air, impossible to lower safely. Only the boats on the lower side could be launched, and even those were overwhelmed. Passengers who had never been through a safety drill, many had boarded just hours earlier and hadn't yet completed one, were now trying to navigate corridors tilted like a collapsing building in the dark, with the floor becoming a wall beneath their feet. Some climbed down the exposed hull by rope, some jumped into the freezing water, some simply held on and waited for someone to find them. And somewhere in the middle of all this, Captain Francesco Schettino left his ship. He was seen leaving the bridge a little after 11:20 p.m. Not long after, he was off the vessel entirely, while hundreds of his passengers were still trapped aboard. He would later claim that he didn't abandon ship at all. He said he fell. He said he slipped, lost his footing near the lifeboats, and simply ended up in one, as if command of a sinking ship carrying 4,000 people could be surrendered by accident. At 12:46 that morning, the Coast Guard's Livorno Command Center reached him again. On the other end was Captain Gregorio De Falco. De Falco had already heard that hundreds of people were still aboard, and now he had the ship's own captain on the phone, safely ashore, refusing to go back. De Falco ordered him back onto the ship to take charge of the rescue. Schettino stalled. He said it was dark. He said the lifeboat couldn't get back to the ship. De Falco's patience ran out. His response, captured on tape, later played in court, later printed on T-shirts across Italy, became one of the most infamous rebukes in the maritime history, an order shouted in fury to get back on board. Schettino never did. What saved the more than 4,000 people aboard that night wasn't the captain. It was everyone else. Coast Guard patrol boats, merchant vessels diverted from nearby waters, helicopter crews flying in and out of the dark for hours, firefighters and Navy divers cutting through steel and tilted corridors to reach people trapped inside. And the people of Giglio Island itself, fishermen and residents who took their own small boats out in the dark again and again, ferrying frightened strangers back to shore because they simply couldn't stand by and watch. The island's deputy mayor climbed aboard the sinking ship himself, searching deck after deck for anyone still left behind before he finally left at 5:30 in the morning. By dawn, more than 4,000 people had been brought to safety. The following day, divers pulled 3 more survivors from deep inside the wreck, the last people who would come out of Costa Concordia alive. 32 people did not. A cruise ship this size isn't just steel and engines, it's a memory. Every navigation computer logs its course, every radar sweep records what's out there in the dark, every command spoken on the bridge is captured, time-stamped, permanent. Investigators call it the voyage data recorder. Sailors call it something simpler, the black box. And on the night Costa Concordia went down, that black box heard everything. Now it was time to listen. Within hours, investigators, prosecutors, and Coast Guard officials descended on Giglio Island. Their questions were simple to ask, almost impossible to answer. Why had Costa Concordia deviated from her approved route? Could the collision have been avoided? Were passengers warned quickly enough? Did the crew follow established emergency procedures? And the question that would haunt Francesco Schettino for the rest of his life: had the captain fulfilled his responsibilities? Survivors were interviewed, officers questioned, thousands of photographs studied frame by frame, every radio transmission replayed again and again until a timeline began to take shape. A timeline that would change everything. The investigation concluded what the black box had already made plain. This disaster was preventable. Investigators confirmed the sequence: the unauthorized deviation, the reef, the 50-meter gash, the flooding that no modern cruise ship is designed to survive. They confirmed something else too, that the delay in informing passengers and the delay in sounding the alarm cost minutes that could never be recovered. Minutes that might have meant lifeboats launched level and calm instead of at a dangerous list, minutes that might have meant a faster, safer evacuation for everyone aboard. The official report also identified deeper failures in bridge communication, in coordination among officers, in the basic disciplines of following procedure. One mistake rarely sinks a ship. This one took several, stacked one on top of another until there was no way back. All over the world, one image dominated the headlines. Not the ship on her side, the captain off it, while thousands of his passengers were still trying to get out. For as long as there have been captains, there has been one unbroken rule of the sea: the last person off a sinking ship is the one who commanded it. It isn't tradition for tradition's sake. A captain directs the evacuation, coordinates the crew, stays until there is no one left to save. Francesco Schettino was charged with manslaughter, causing the shipwreck and abandoning ship before the evacuation was complete. The trial that followed became a global spectacle. Survivors testified, officers testified, rescue workers took the stand, and running beneath it all, the cold, unfeeling data from the black box, timestamp by timestamp, replaying the worst night of over 4,000 lives. Schettino admitted his mistakes, but he argued something else too, that steering the crippled ship back toward shore after the collision had saved lives that would otherwise have been lost at sea. The investigators didn't fully disagree. Grounding the ship near shore likely did prevent an even greater catastrophe. But the court found it didn't erase what came before or what he did after. In 2015, Schettino was found guilty. 16 years in prison, upheld on appeal. The verdict carried a message far beyond one courtroom. Command means nothing if you abandon it the moment it costs you something. But justice was only half the story. Costa Concordia was still there, lying on her side of Giglio Island. A wounded steel giant visible from the shore, impossible to ignore. No one had ever attempted to remove a wreck this large, this intact in a marine environment, this fragile. Cutting her apart where she lay would have meant fuel, debris, and decades of pollution spilling into protected waters. So engineers chose the only other option: raise her whole. First, they had to stabilize her, building massive underwater platforms so the ship wouldn't slide into the deep. Divers spent months working beneath the hull, in the dark, in currents, in conditions most people would never dare imagine. Then came the operation with a name almost no one outside the industry had heard before: parbuckling. Steel cables, hydraulic pulling systems, months of preparation for a single irreversible attempt. On the 16th of September 2013, it began. At first, nothing, just tension, just waiting. Then, almost imperceptibly, movement. Hour after hour, the cables pulled, the hydraulics strained, and the world watched live as a 114,000-ton cruise ship was slowly, deliberately rotated back onto her keel. It worked. It remains one of the largest shipwrighting operations ever completed. Even then, she wasn't finished. Massive flotation tanks were welded to her sides. By July of 2014, Costa Concordia floated once more. Tugboats took her north to Genoa, not for another voyage, but for the scrapyard. The ship, built to symbolize luxury, ended her life being cut apart for steel. The cruise industry didn't just watch this disaster, it was forced to rebuild around it. Because Costa Concordia proved something uncomfortable: the most advanced ship in the world is still only as safe as the person standing on the bridge. Passengers today are required to complete a safety briefing before the ship ever leaves port. No exceptions, no delays. Bridge officers are retrained again and again in something called bridge resource management, the discipline of communication, of checks and balances, of never letting one person's judgment go unquestioned. Route deviations, once treated casually, are now scrutinized. Every maritime academy in the world now teaches this disaster as a case study, not of bad luck, but of bad decisions and how easily they compound. It's easy to remember Costa Concordia as an image, a ship on her side, a headline, a trial. But 32 people never left that island. They were parents, children, grandparents, newlyweds on their honeymoon. People who boarded expecting nothing more than a holiday. Thousands of survivors carried the night home with them: nightmares, fear of water, an inability to step onto a ship again. Crew members who risked everything for strangers carried their own invisible wounds. And the people of Giglio Island, a small fishing community that never asked to become the center of a global tragedy, opened their homes to the frightened and the freezing without hesitation in the middle of the night. Their compassion is part of this story too, maybe the most important part. There was no storm that night, no rogue wave, no hidden iceberg, no mechanical failure waiting to happen. The sea was calm, the sky was clear, the ship, by every measure, was sound. What sank Costa Concordia wasn't nature, it was a choice, then another, each one small enough to seem harmless in the moment. That's the part that should unsettle you most. Not that something went catastrophically wrong, but that it all began so quietly, one decision made without a second thought that could never be undone. More than a decade later, Costa Concordia still teaches the same lesson to every captain, every officer, every crew member who steps onto a bridge. The ship can be perfect, the technology can be flawless, but safety, in the end, always comes down to the people trusted to protect it.